I was just one step away from winning the game, but that step was having the male protagonist's child. Even though all three of my targets dropped their affection levels to 0. The system promised me that as long as I successfully delivered the baby, I'd complete the task. But when I was 7 months pregnant, my CEO husband rushed into the hospital to take me away. My childhood friend personally pushed me onto the operating table. My parents signed the consent form outside. No matter how much I begged, they took my baby away just to get umbilical cord blood for my sister Jane. I was left alone on the operating table, listening to the cries of my baby gradually stop. The system also declared I failed the task and said I would lose my life. But when my life was really slipping away, why did all those people who said why didn't I just die start losing their minds? In the maternity ward, the doctor put down the instrument and gently congratulated me, "The baby's healthy. Looks like a beautiful baby." I breathed a sigh of relief and was about to get off the bed. Suddenly, the examination room door swung open, and a group rushed in, led by none other than my husband, famous group CEO Jack. He's also my third target, but his heart's only ever had room for Jane. The doctor was about to scold them, but was dragged out by the black-suited bodyguards. Jack walked up to me slowly, his cold, emotionless gaze chilled me to the bone. He glanced at my belly with a look of barely concealed usefulness. Then, I was hoisted up by the bodyguards. Sensing trouble, I struggled like crazy. "Jack, what are you doing?" Jack stepped forward, gripping my chin. "Jane is sick, and she needs direct family umbilical cord blood for treatment. You went through all the trouble to carry this bastard, so at least you're useful for that." I looked at him incredulously. "Jack, the baby's only 7 months old, what do you plan to do?" Jack scoffed disdainfully. "Deliver early, of course. Don't use the child to blackmail me, he's lucky to help save Jane." My mind buzzed like thunder. Jack wanted to forcibly take my child out to treat Jane. I pleaded, "Jack, I'm begging you. He's only 7 months. A forced C-section will not let him survive. Just 3 more months, and I'll give birth. Can't we wait until then for the cord blood?" Jack didn't even bother to look at me. 3 months? Sounds like you just want to drag it out and let Jane die. How could that be? Jane wasn't even sick. She was only faking it to frame me. Tears streamed down my face. "Jack, please, the baby will die, and so will I." Jack sneered. "Now you're scared? Weren't you afraid when you tricked your way into this pregnancy? Enough, that brat wasn't meant to be in the first place, death just means he wasn't blessed." Before my cries could escape, Jack signaled the bodyguards to gag me. Cold tears ran down my face as a sense of utter despair took over. The system's cold alert followed, detected that the child will be born prematurely, mission failed, mission failed. Both mother and child will be removed. After a moment of silence, the system informed me I still had one chance, asking if I wanted to try. If I could accumulate enough regret points from the characters, it would still count as a mission success. Watching Jack anxiously arranging the operating room and doctors, I tearfully shook my head. There's no hope. Even if I died, they wouldn't shed a tear for me. In the end, I couldn't compare to Jane. I once thought Jack was my salvation. When my parents and childhood friend Gary abandoned me for Jane, Jack appeared like a god. When I was teased by guests while working at a hotel, he saved me. And when I was kicked out of my home by my parents, he took me in despite the snowstorm. Even when he first met Jane, he didn't waver. He even told my parents and Gary that he didn't believe I'd intentionally lose my sister. But then, at our wedding, Jane took out a small bamboo flute. Jack's eyes lit up, and he held Jane's hand, saying he'd been looking for her for 10 years. Since then, no matter what I did, if Jane was around, it was wrong. Even our child was a mistake. Lying on the cold operating table, I lay still like a corpse, and Jack was somewhat surprised. He looked at me and sneered, "If you knew this, why did you put yourself through this suffering?" I glanced at my hands and feet, bruised from the struggle. But I no longer cared and calmly said, "Give me a divorce agreement." Even though I turned down the last task, the system kept urging me to end things with them. Jack looked at me in disbelief. What did you say? I knew why he was shocked because even when he wanted to divorce me for Jane, offering a huge settlement, I never agreed. Even as he ignored me and humiliated me in front of others, I never mentioned divorce. I closed my eyes. Let's divorce, Jack. At least don't let our child be sent off by his own father. Jack seemed momentarily stunned but soon grew contemptuous again. Don't think you can guilt trip me. I hired the best doctors, that brat won't have an issue. You think everyone's as cold-hearted as you, using a child as a tool. Despite the deep, stabbing pain inside me, I didn't want to argue anymore. No matter what I said, he wouldn't believe me. I quietly said, Jack, haven't you always wanted freedom? Just as well, I don't want the child to have you as a dad anymore. Jack stared at me, his expression changing as if figuring out the truth. Finally, Gary, the lead doctor beside us, spoke. If you don't sign, how long will Jane have to wait? Jack finally took the divorce papers from his assistant, signing them and throwing them at me. You're at fault, don't think you'll get a cent. I didn't even want to ask why I was at fault, nor cared about the money. After all, I'm about to die. The C-section was quick, just an hour or so. I gently touched my belly with a lingering sense of attachment. I'm sorry, little one, your mom couldn't protect you after all. I felt a flutter inside, like a tiny hand pressing against me. I couldn't hold back anymore and tears fell down my face. Gary, standing nearby, and my second target to win over, vowed to protect the love of his life forever. He sneered coldly at my tears. Oh please, stop pretending. Someone as cruel as you actually cares if your kid lives or dies. I looked at his gentle face all full of contempt and couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Gary, you said you'd protect me forever. I reminded him. I was the one who grew up with him, not Jane. At first, Gary didn't believe I was the one responsible for letting Jane disappear. When my parents were disappointed in me and locked me up, almost starving me, it was Gary who climbed over from the balcony next door with food. It was the 20th floor, yet he didn't flinch and just said, when we grow up, I'll take you with me. But Jane, although she had so many friends at school, wouldn't leave Gary alone. After bringing water to him on the field time and again, Gary began to mention Jane, wondering if we misunderstood her. I didn't respond, and Gary fell into an awkward silence. At that moment, I finally understood why Gary's affection for me, almost at full, suddenly dropped a notch. Gary was still really nice to me, but bit by bit, he was even nicer to Jane. He skipped classes for Jane, fought for Jane, even stabbed the department head for her. All because Jane said the department head's eyes made her uncomfortable. That head had been teaching for 20 years and was only known for being strict, not creepy. Jane just got scolded for dressing too provocatively. But Gary went crazy over it, not caring a bit. When Gary's affection for me dropped to 30%, his madness reached me. Gary, who hadn't picked me up in ages, brought a bag of snacks I loved one day. I followed him unsuspectingly to an abandoned warehouse. As soon as the door closed, Gary's deadly stare kicked me to the ground. You're a girl too, how did you have the heart to hurt Jane? You spread those nasty rumors about her and now the old department geezer has his eye on her. No matter how I cried or tried to explain, Gary ripped off my clothes, photographing me in my underwear. Before leaving, he took my clothes away. You like spreading rumors? Let's see how you like being a real one. I cried in the factory, too scared to come out. But this time, Gary didn't return to save me. Late at night, a homeless guy found me. I fought him off and escaped only after smashing a brick over his head. Later, when my parents picked me up at the police station, Gary claimed I stripped down in a ploy to seduce him. The rumors of me throwing myself at Gary circulated like wildfire. Everyone dubbed me a slut, every bad boy wanted a piece. I terrifiedly trudged through college and finally secured a spot at a top foreign university. But Gary framed me for drugging Jane during our graduate exams, messing up her performance. He threatened me with photos to give up my spot to Jane. My only hope was crushed and he blocked all paths for me to retry. just because he feared I'd eventually get a master's and hurt Jane again. Since then, I had to take whatever odd jobs I could to survive. But Gary wouldn't let it go. Whenever I showed some progress somewhere, he'd send thugs to cause trouble. Until I met Jack, when he finally halted his antics. Only because Jane hoped to approach Jack through me. Even if Jane didn't love him, he eagerly gave her everything. Just like now, in order to save Jane's life. He'd risk having his medical license revoked just to perform a C-section on me himself. Seeing me mention his promise from our youth, Gary's disdain deepened. "Do you really think you're worthy?" Gary said, putting on gloves and starting to prep the instruments. He placed a gel-covered hand coldly on my belly, like he was examining livestock. Then he nodded, satisfied. "Even a tiger doesn't devour its cubs. Despite your cruelty, you've raised this baby well. If this child can save Jane's life, I might return what you lost." "No need," I calmly replied, knowing that everything of mine had long been passed around by Jane. I raised my bound hand. "Gary, here's your promise back." When Gary saw the bracelet on my wrist, surprise flickered in his eyes. Nothing but a cheap cartoon rope with faded dye over the years. He carefully removed it, emotions complex in his gaze. He had given that to me as a child, saying it represented a promise for the future. His voice softened, just a bit. "I can agree to everything except letting you go." I averted my gaze, no longer looking at him. "Gary, when I'm gone, scatter my ashes in the river, all right?" He chuckled at my words. "I always knew you had bad intentions, trying to get pity? It's just a C-section, you won't die from this." I forced a smile. "I trust your skills. But everyone dies eventually." Seeing me so docile, Gary held back from saying more hurtful things. "All right then, since you want to use that promise on this, don't regret it. From now on, as long as you don't trouble Jane, we won't have any ties." He turned away, checking the instruments. Gary was so cautious that he didn't even want a nurse doing the procedure alone. I watched his back and whispered, "Goodbye, Gary." The system confirmed our last bond was severed. I asked it, confused, why was I urged to cut ties with the targets when I'm bound to die? But the once chatty system fell silent. At that moment, my original parents and the first target I met in this world rushed in. Clutching a contract, they forcefully pulled me to sign it. It was a surrogacy agreement. As long as Jane's sick, I have to keep having kids. Stock up on enough cord blood for Jane. In the story, the parents Matt and Kate were my first targets. The system counted them as one target because family bonds were easy to gain. I needed both of them to be 100% fond of me for a successful strategy. Since Jane got lost, they cherished me more. Their fondness for me hovered around 99%. I enjoyed their love for years, thinking it would last. Even if I couldn't succeed with the strategy, I'd be fine growing old with them here. But everything changed the day Jane returned. He said, "I don't know why my sister left me there." They believed him without checking the truth, thinking I was the one who lost Jane. Every time Jane begged, "Sister, I'll be good, please don't leave me," their glances turned cold. They stopped caring about me, only attending Jane's parent-teacher meetings and vacations, buying things only for her. I became invisible at home. They happily ate together, but when I sat down, the room went silent, and I didn't even have a plate. Later, they left for business trips and rarely came home. Jane and I were sent to boarding school. But a classmate later told me Jane was a day student, and Mom and Dad picked her up every day. Then I found out they had a new home elsewhere. When I brought Jack home, they didn't show up. But when Jane said she liked Jack, they called. They arranged a lavish banquet. But after getting Jack drunk, they sent Jane to his room. They shut me out, saying, "This is what you owe Jane." Jack wouldn't comply and escaped through the window. They found me, urging me to persuade Jack to marry Jane. Nothing went their way, and we didn't contact each other for years. They told neighbors I eloped with a thug and died elsewhere. If not for Jane's illness, I doubt they'd have come to see me. I stayed still as they imprinted my hand to make me a lifelong tool for Jane. Afterward, they told Gary, sew it up well, or she won't be able to have more. Gary nodded. Have you signed the surgery consent? Kate was confused. Why would we sign? I calmly pointed out, I divorced Jack. You're my closest relatives now. Matt was briefly happy. You finally divorced Jack. He and Jane were meant to be. I didn't argue, just reminded, sign the consent form. After all, only you are my direct family now. Kate flew into a rage and slapped me hard. Is that a curse on Jane? Isn't she your sister? My head hit the table, blood streamed down my face, blurring my vision. In the bloody haze, Kate's loving face twisted like a demon. Matt was worried, but not for me. Will bleeding affect the cord blood's quality? When Gary denied it, they relaxed. Then they looked at me with disgust. How did we birth such a toxic daughter? Watching them contentedly sign the form, I said, Dad, Mom, I'll love you forever. That's what I often said to them as a child. Whenever they mourned losing Jane, saying this lifted them up. Back then, they held little me, saying they couldn't manage without me. Now, Matt and Kate gave a brief pause, then looked at me like a traitor. We can't afford your love. I forced a smile. Give me a disownment agreement then, consider Jane your only daughter. Matt and Kate didn't hesitate, even using a tissue for the paper. They eagerly imprinted it. Let's keep it clean if we disown you. Don't use the name we gave our precious daughter. We'll be pure without a vicious girl like you. They turned, leaving without a backward glance. My eyes stung with tears, not sure if it was blood or fresh tears. Gary injected anesthesia. My body was numb, but my mind was sharp. I felt the blade slice my belly, feeling the separation from my child. When the cord was cut, pain surged through me. As Gary gasped, I watched my unstoppable bleeding form a river under the table. He hesitated, then ran out with the cord blood. My premature baby lay lifeless beside me. I reached for him, and before death took me, I held his tiny hand. In a haze, I heard the baby's voice, Mama, don't cry. Tears poured from me, yet I couldn't warm my child's hand. Baby, Mama's coming to join you. Congrats host, the strategy has transformed. Calculating the regret value for 3 targets, 6 hours on the clock. I aimlessly floated above my body, but couldn't see my child's soul. The system promised we'd reunite after the calculation. I quietly watched my world post-death. Gary shockingly returned first. He was sweating, startled by blood pooling at the door. Luna, don't pass out. He grabbed a defibrillator, shocking me. Didn't you love fighting back? Why not now? Wake up or your child will be snatched. My body trembled under the defibrillator. One jolt, another, then another. It seemed alive, yet the monitor showed no life signs. Minutes later, Jack stormed and annoyed. Did you soften again, checking on her? I told you we arranged doctors. Why not watch Jane? He froze at my pale body. Gary kept shouting, Luna, wake up. Wake up. Do you want your child to be born without a mom? The sharp beeping of the machine snapped Jack awake. As he took a step, he felt something sticky beneath his feet. It was then he noticed the pool of blood surrounding him. In disbelief, Jack stared at the operating room. It was just him, the baby's body, and a frantic Gary, no doctors, no nurses. He couldn't help but roar, where are the doctors and nurses I arranged? Where is everybody? How could they leave her alone here? Jack rushed toward the door, only to run into Matt and Kate. Matt looked annoyed. Why are you guys down here? Is Luna causing trouble again? Jack ignored him, pushed them aside, and yelled at his secretary outside, where are the doctors I set up? Kate chimed in, I sent them to Jane. Why keep so many doctors for this troublemaker Luna? It's just a C-section, no need for such a fuss. Jack turned, his eyes red with anger, locking onto Kate. Did you really pull the doctors away? Matt frowned, stepping forward. Jack, what's with the attitude? even though you and Jane aren't married yet, we're practically your in-laws. It's just a few doctors. Jane was dying, she needed more attention. Jack slapped him hard. Isn't the one lying in there your daughter? Matt hit the ground before he could respond, and the medical team Jack had arranged finally returned. They complained about being moved to handle leukemia patients when they were OB/GYN specialists. Pointing at Matt, Jack said sternly, "Did you hear them? They can't help Jane with her illness." Kate helped Matt up, her tone displeased. Having more people makes Jane feel secure. Everyone has kids, why does Luna need so much fuss over her? Jack laughed bitterly. Are you even her mother? She's 7 months pregnant, a forced C-section is incredibly dangerous, don't you know? Kate's face lost color. No way, isn't she at least 8 or 9 months? Jack didn't respond to her, he urged the doctors to go in and save me quickly. But as they stepped into the surgery room, they froze. Seeing them hesitate, Jack shouted impatiently, "Why aren't you saving her?" The doctor turned around. "Jack, she's already gone." Jack grabbed the doctor. "Are you kidding me? That person was just being resuscitated. I just saw her chest moving." Seeing him in denial, the doctor looked at him sympathetically. "Jack, with this much blood loss, it's more than a normal person's body holds. Plus, the heart monitor alerted us, even a miracle couldn't save her. I'm really sorry for your loss." Jack's hands fell weakly as he staggered back a few steps. How could this be? His back hit the cold wall as despair took over his face. I arranged for the best doctors. How could a simple C-section go wrong? As he was muttering this, he remembered the baby and grabbed the doctor. "There's still a baby. Save the baby, please." The doctor had already noticed the baby's lifeless body. Sighing, he said, "Jack, we lost the baby too. Being born at 7 months is hard enough, and without an immediate handoff to medical staff." Jack swayed, his mouth opened but no sound came out. Trembling, he walked forward. It was just a few feet, but it felt like crossing a vast pit. Eventually, he saw me holding the baby's hand together. Jack roared like a beast in agony and sucker-punched Gary. "Aren't you a genius doctor? What kind of surgery did you perform?" Gary fell to the floor, already soaked in blood, and his lip cut from Jack's strike. But he didn't care. He stood up, clutching the defibrillator again. "Luna, wake up. Quit fooling around. I won't take it anymore." Seeing Gary's craziness only fueled Jack's anger more, and he hit him again. But Gary didn't dodge, he just kept his eyes on me. Punch after punch, Jack hit Gary over and over, hysterically. But no matter how many times he fell, Gary would stand up again, holding on to the defibrillator. Eventually, Jack broke down, he stopped caring about Gary and tried to hold the baby. But he realized the baby's body had stiffened, our grips tightly locked, inseparable. Jack collapsed over me, sobbing uncontrollably, "Luna, Luna." Watching this tragic scene unfold, I didn't feel any satisfaction. The system, witnessing the chaos, calculated the regret level of these two. Its cold voice carried a hint of glee. "Host, you'll be able to return soon." But I felt nothing. A 100% regret level? Impossible. As soon as Jane appeared, they would be all about her. Nobody else could earn even a shred of attention. After so many disappointments, I've learned not to expect anything from them. I just hoped it'd all end soon so I could say sorry to my baby. Growing impatient, Matt and Kate started pushing. "Isn't this over yet? Jane's probably worried sick. Luna, this wretched girl, is the best at acting. Don't go soft on her." Jack's secretary handed him the phone. "Jack, Dr. Gary, Jane is looking for you." Jane's sweet voice came through. "Jack, Gary, is my sister keeping you from leaving? I know asking her to save me is hard for her, she hates me so much. But I don't want to give up on living, I'm scared of not getting to see you. I'm scared and need you by my side." Jack snapped back, knocked the phone off, and ordered his bodyguards to drag Gary away. Furious, he threw Matt and Kate into the room. "Do you have no heart? Your daughter is gone. Matt and Kate were disoriented from the fall, but Kate immediately cursed, "Gone? What's up to this time?" "I knew it, she's just trying to get you away from Jane." Matt was the first to realize something was wrong. Feeling the stickiness of the blood on him, his voice shook. "Whose blood is this?" Kate snapped back to reality, staring at the blood-soaked floor, her lips trembling. She had kids too, so naturally, she knew what all that blood meant. Jack ignored them and came over to me, taking off his clothes to cover my body. His fingertips grazed my cold face, and tears fell uncontrollably. "Babe, don't be scared. I'll take you and the baby home now." Matt got up and tried to feel my breath, touching my cold skin. He jerked his hand away like he got shocked. Why so cold?" Kate forced a pale smile, came over, and started tidying up my messy hair. "Luna, you loved looking pretty. What happened?" Her fingers, as gentle as when I was a kid, moved through my hair. "It's okay, Mom will comb it out for you." Kate hummed a lullaby from when I was young, combing my hair with her hands. Jack pushed her away, protecting my body. "Don't touch. It's your fault Luna's dead. If you hadn't taken the doctor away, she'd still be here." Matt, crying, held the still calling my nickname Kate and shouted at Jack, "What right do you have? You and Luna divorced, remember?" Gary snapped back to reality, broke free from the bodyguards, and stood in front of me, brandishing a scalpel. "Luna trusted me with handling her ashes. You all get lost." Jack didn't back down, and they started fighting, with Jack getting stabbed a few times. Matt left Kate and jumped into the fray. Just then, Jane's voice came from the door. "What are you guys doing? Leaving me out there?" Unlike before, no one paid her any mind. Jane stepped forward, trying to break up the bloody fight, and got shoved, falling onto the operating table. My body got knocked over, hitting the ground hard. Gary looked over, his eyes red and filled with rage. He pushed the two away and gently picked me and the baby up. Jane hurriedly approached. "Gary, why carry a corpse? It's bad luck." Gary kicked her to the ground amidst a pile of equipment. Her face filled with grievance, she looked at Jack. "Jack, Gary's gone crazy." Jack ignored her too, shaking off her grip and chasing after Gary, who carried me away. Unbelieving, Jane looked at her empty hand and then whined to Matt and Kate. "Dad, Mom, look at them bullying me because of sister." But her weepy tone didn't draw any glances from Matt or Kate. They wobbled after us toward the door. Jane watched the empty room, her beautiful face twisting into malevolence. She smashed things in a rage. "Even dead, you're stealing my spotlight. I'll ruin your reputation, you'll be a despised disgrace even in death." Floating in front, I couldn't help but sneer. "Jane, you're still as ruthless as ever." As my body went to the crematorium, my soul drifted along unwillingly. The four of them, bloodied, looked like they'd crawled from hell. The incinerator roared, unable to brighten their dimmed eyes. A staff member came to get a signature from family. They started arguing again. Jack declared self-righteously, "I married Luna, I'm the closest family." Gary threw the divorce agreement back at him. "Jack, you were just the ex now." Jack froze, pain filling his eyes. Before Matt could speak, Gary threw another paper, severing parental ties. "You just said you wish she was never born." Matt slumped over, Kate fell to the ground crying. The staff handed Gary the consent form. "Are you Luna's brother?" Gary's hand trembled with the pen, frozen and unable to sign. In the end, it was Jane who arrived to sign the papers. The four, lost in their feelings, ignored her. Cremation was an hour away, same as when I'd fully disappear. The system reported their remorse levels. Matt and Kate's remorse, 80. Gary's remorse, 93. Jack's remorse, 87. Seeing this, they were still far from true regret. The system had no comforting words. But I wasn't sad anymore. I knew this outcome from the start. They were just caught up in the moment. A few words from Jane, and they'd scrub away any remorse. Jane went back to her gentle facade, comforting them one by one. Their sorrow slightly faded with her words. The system alarmed, remorse declining, remorse declining. And Jane looked smug. Just then, Jack's secretary came in. Apparently, the photos Gary had taken of me spread wide online. The tag Jack's wife was an escort from college trended. Jack stomped up, smashing his phone in anger. How do you handle this? Get them all taken down now. Matt and Kate joined in. How can they say that about Luna? Realizing her mistake, Jane backtracked quickly. Oh, don't be mad. I saw those photos online before, asked Sis about them, and she said it was art. She wasn't careful, letting those photos go everywhere. Can't blame others for talking. Jane's words were laced with malice but feigned concern. Her usual tactic. She didn't notice the rage-blackened face of Gary behind her. Jane kept talking, and Gary slapped her. What nonsense are you spouting? Jane held her face, crying. Gary, I know you and Sis had a special bond, but speaking truths can't be banned. If she chose to take those kinds of photos, how is it others' fault? Maybe her coy looks were meant for some other guy. Gary kicked her over again. I took those photos. I locked them safely. How'd they spread everywhere? He stepped closer to Jane. Only you know the password. Jane, forgetting she'd spread them ages ago, stumbled back pale-faced. Everyone else snapped back, glaring at her. Jane grew frantic, grabbing her chest to faint. Just then, Jack's secretary announced, Jack, the source said an account named Jane sent them. The IP is still being tracked. Jane is her English name. Jack clenched his fists, speaking to Jane with fierce intensity. You better pray that person isn't you. Meanwhile, Matt and Kate's phone rang. What? You said you found the wrong child? They put the call on speaker, and the voice of the cop came through clearly. Sorry, we've been cleaning up our data and found there was an error when the records were entered back then. Jane isn't your lost daughter. Jane had been deceived and brought down from the north, coincidentally under the control of the same scammer, and she was the same age, which led to the mix-up. Matt couldn't believe it. Then where is our daughter? The cop's voice was stern. According to the scammer's confession, after they took your child, they found she was weak and sick, so they abandoned her in a pond. Kate fainted upon hearing this. After Matt thanked the officer and was about to hang up, the cop added, There's something of yours to pick up, a small gold locket. They said when they kidnapped her, your older daughter fought back hard, biting and kicking, refusing to let go. They had to knock her out to take your younger daughter. They took the locket from your older daughter since she was hard to scam. Matt repeated in shock. Luna protected her sister? The officer, not understanding, simply acknowledged and hung up. Jane's face was pale, and she looked away nervously. I don't remember. I only recall being taken by the scammer when I was little. Gary kicked Jane hard. You always claimed Luna left you. How come now you can't remember? Jane crawled to the corner, trembling. My parents asked why my sister wasn't taken, but I was. So I thought. Yeah, it was them. How could a kid say something like that on their own? Matt couldn't hold back, his face flushed as he threw his phone at Jane. It hit her right in the face, causing her to cry out in pain, her nose bent to one side. Crying, she crawled towards Jack. Jack, save me. They're all crazy. Jack pulled out that flute. You're not from the South, how'd you save me when you were 5? Seeing her lie exposed, Jane scrambled to run. Gary grabbed her by the hair, dragging her back. You're not Luna's sister, where'd you get this congenital illness from? Jane screamed like a stuck pig. My parents told me I was sick. Jack gave a look and his assistant went to check. They returned with a thick stack of papers, all proof of Jane's deceit over the years. It was a crude scheme, yet none of them had questioned or checked it thoroughly. At this point, my ashes were returned. Jane was tossed aside like a rag doll, surrounded by watchful bodyguards. Kate was revived by Matt pinching her hand, and they all gathered around my urn, eyes red with sorrow and regret. The system announced, regret level achieved, congratulations to the host for completing the task. I felt no joy, only asked, where's my baby? You promised I'd see him. The system was silent for a moment, and a terrible feeling crept into my heart. Just as I was about to ask, Jack gasped, "Luna, is that you?" I looked over, annoyed. It was like the four of them could see me. Gently, they put down the urn and rushed towards me, but they passed right through. Jack was sobbing, nearly choking, "Honey, I was wrong, I was wrong." Gary was distraught, "Luna, we promised forever." Matt and Kate were crying, "Luna, it was our fault, you explained it so many times." I ignored them, shouting into the void, "Where's my child?" The four of them stood there dumbstruck, and the system finally spoke, "Host, your child gave you this chance to accumulate regret points. Host, he's been absorbed by the main system. It was his sacrifice to give you a second chance at life. Don't squander his goodwill." My head buzzed, lost in thought. My little baby, he hadn't even seen the world and had sacrificed himself to protect me. The four of them also heard the system's voice, "Are you saying Luna's child gave her a chance to come back to life?" The system replied coldly, "Yes." The four of them were frantic, "Luna, come back. We know we messed up." I wiped the tears from my face, looking at them coldly, "You want me to come back?" They nodded like crazy, terrified that I would disappear for good. I let out a sarcastic laugh, "You regret it now?" Jack pleaded, "Luna, our baby gave us a chance. Please come back, let me make it up to you." I replied indifferently, "Jack, you yourself said that's not your child, but a bastard." I glanced at their expressions and sneered, "You regret it, but I don't want to anymore." I turned away and spoke to the system, "Take me back." A white light engulfed me as my figure began to fade. Gary rushed forward, "Luna, where are you going? Take me with you." Kate wailed, "Luna, are you leaving us?" The white light fully surrounded me, and a warmth enveloped me. I knew it was my baby holding me. I didn't spare a final glance at their regretful faces. When I opened my eyes again, I saw my past life's parents. They joyfully hugged me, "Dear, you've finally woken up." I felt the embrace I'd longed for and began to cry. The system's voice became increasingly faint, "Host, the reward has been delivered. Live well." A huge fortune came through, and my family was back, yet there was still an emptiness inside me. In that other world, I didn't let anyone down, but I did owe my child an entire life. Even with the system sending me updates from the original world, I couldn't feel happy. Matt and Kate went completely mad, wandering the streets searching for their daughter. Gary kidnapped countless people, demanding to know if they had a system. Jack stayed at the hotel where we first met, too drunk to ever return home. And that fake Jane experienced all the hardships I once endured. In less than a month, she tried to jump into the river. But Jack had arranged for bodyguards to fish her out. She lived a life where she couldn't live or die peacefully. But none of this could bring my baby's life back. Until one day, a little child bumped into my leg, looked up, and said, "Mom, I've been looking for you for so long." At that moment, my empty heart finally felt whole. And the weak system bid farewell, a parting gift. "Host, you must be happy." I held my baby and nodded tearfully, "I will, I promise."